Hi, everybody. This is a little video for the Rucellai Gardens in January. As you can tell, my voice is not doing too well, so bear with me and I'll try my best here. There's a couple of purposes for making this, um, mostly because I would like the discussions to be kicked up a notch and the papers as well. For the Rucellai Gardens of December, which, overall were not bad by any means, but a lot of people submitted papers that they could have wrote basically off the top of their heads. I don't think with even consulting the textbook. Then there were some people that consulted the textbook. Very few people approached the supplemental readings, which are really crucial. And in the three honors discussions, I think only two people referenced the supplemental readings, and they were from A5. So I'm trying to give you a little preview of what the textbook is and what the readings are. Um, Not that this should be where you end, because you continue see this as a starting point, but to give you ideas when you look at the readings. All right. So for this month's Rucellai Gardens, there's a couple of questions you can pick from. What intellectual developments led to the Enlightenment? Who were leading figures of the Enlightenment and what did they contribute? And what role did women play in the Enlightenment? So I really made sure I picked supplemental readings that address um, various questions here so that you could definitely look for more than what you have. Now, remember, you're not writing a formal essay. You don't need a thesis. You can focus on one part of this. You're not going to address all these questions, right? So just find one thing that you could write like a good page or two on. So the first thing you're going to want to do is read the textbook starting at page 514, and you actually see those questions there. And I have a picture here, an image, which actually isn't from the French Enlightenment. But why it's so crucial you understand this is because next year you're going to learn about our revolution. And if you don't understand the Enlightenment, it's going to be really difficult to understand the revolution. So it's really important that you understand these concepts and some of these key figures whose ideas our Constitution and other political documents were based off of. Now, some of this is actually review from the Enlightenment videos that we've done in class, or that you may have done yet, you may not have done yet, but a little review doesn't hurt. So the whole idea with this is Enlightenment is continuing what we've learned about basically since the Renaissance. And people wanted to acquire knowledge. So, which is why they call the motto of Kant a dare to know. The scientific revolution, which we ended the last unit with, impressed many people, and they saw the scientific method and how that helped solve scientific questions. And they thought, well, why can't we take those ideas and apply them to other areas of life? So you're not going to apply the scientific method, let's say, to religion and politics or economics, but you can apply reason to it. And so those are some of the key ideas of the Enlightenment: reason, natural law, hope, and progress. You have to realize that people were also a bit skeptical as they were acquiring more scientific knowledge, and they realized that they were wrong about many things from the past. What else were they wrong about? So they were skeptical of a lot of like superstitions and things like that. That does not mean that they didn't believe in God, right? Some people did it, but even many philosophers still did. It's just that they viewed it differently than maybe has been previously in history. And also, as people were now traveling throughout the globe, the world became more global. We learned that in the last unit as well, correct? They realized that other people and other cultures envisioned God in different ways. So that made their interpretations change a little bit as well. So we need to know who these philosophers were. A philosophe is basically the French word for a philosopher. And the center of where these philosophers really took hold were in Paris, in France. And they had some common goals. Basically was to learn to make the world better. But most of them believed in the freedom of expression. And actually, a lot of their works were censored because they were considered revolutionary. They had to try to avoid that censorship. Keep in mind, this does not mean that they agreed on everything, right? But they did agree on some things. So we're going to focus on a couple of the philosophers here, which could be one of the angles you take your paper on. It's up to you. So first, we have Montesquieu and political thought. Now, he actually wasn't known for being a political writer for most of his life, and actually, people were surprised when he began writing on politics. Um, he did write on many topics on religious toleration. Think of all the religious wars that Europe was fighting, and they saw that as not necessary. He also believed that slavery should end, and he thought that if people apply reason to their thinking, a lot of human prejudices that are held against one another would end. So, 1748, he wrote Spirit of the Laws. Really important to see when was that before our revolution, right? Not too long before. And what he did is he observed natural laws of various governments. He tried to take the scientific method, right? And he observed governments, especially the English government, and tried to basically make conclusions from that. And one of the big things he wrote about was the separation of powers. Another philosophe is Voltaire. And I know I got into him a bit in our other video for class, so I won't be repetitive. We did learn about the Jesuits during the Catholic Counter Reformation, and he did receive a Jesuit education. He really respected the English way of life. He noticed that, keep in mind, he was from France, right? That they had certain freedoms of the press, political freedoms, and religious toleration. Now, he exaggerated the freedoms they had. It's not like everyone was tolerating all these religions in England at the time. And, there weren't 100% political freedoms, but more so than what he saw in France. He was also critical of traditional religion and advocated religious toleration. And he wrote about it in 1763, Treatise on Toleration. So something to keep in mind, once again, prior to our Constitution, when Jefferson is writing about what his vision of church and state was in Virginia and all that sort of stuff. And he was a deist. I go into that in the other videos, so I won't be repetitive. But many of these philosophers were deists. And we also learned a bit about Diderot and writing the first version of the encyclopedia, even though it's nothing like an encyclopedia today. Very skeptical of religion himself. One of his quotes was, "This world is only a mass of molecules," which, some people approach the world like that today. His purpose of collecting all these essays in the encyclopedia was to change the general way of thinking. And in doing so, he attacked religious superstition, promoted religious toleration, and his ideas spread a little bit, but the encyclopedia was still expensive, right? Just because the printing press lowered the price of books doesn't mean they were all cheap, but eventually they did go down in price, and more people could buy them, and then those ideas spread even further. And think about that access to information and who can access it and who can't, and how that makes a difference. All right, now we have Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Some of this is in the other videos as well. The other videos mentioned these two things that he wrote. Really interesting personal life of his to learn about, and very interesting to learn about his theories as well. In the origins of inequality of mankind, he believed in human nature, humans were all equal, and people were happy running around in their native states in the wild without government and without laws, without social norms telling you, what to wear and all sorts of things. But what happened? And he says, basically, people are not happy anymore because we're not in that state anymore. Look at all the self-help books that are out today and people trying to get happy, right? The cavemen weren't looking for those books. Of course, they couldn't, but you know what I'm saying here, right? So what happened? And he says, well, basically, over time, laws were created for people to preserve property. Almost all laws you look at today have a root in property. And those laws start constraining people, thus making them unhappy and putting them in chains. So it's sort of a sad way to look at the world because there's no way you're really going back to the other way. And a bit more optimistic view was when he later wrote The Social Contract. And this is the idea that, okay, we're not going to live in a primitive state anymore, right? We all have to agree to some social norms. We all have to agree to certain laws. And we basically agree to give up certain freedoms in order to have certain protections. And as long as it's the